This is the EpoMaker AK84S. It's a hot swappable custom keyboard for entry-level users like you and me to get into the custom keyboard space. And I gotta tell you, this thing is really impressive, especially for the price. This is the first custom keyboard I've ever built, and it never would have happened if EpoMaker didn't reach out to me like 3 or 4 months ago or whenever it was and said, hey, want to try out our new AK84S? Obviously, I said yes. And after customizing everything that I wanted to, my switches, stabilizers, and even the keycaps, the feel and typing experience is just on a whole nother level than any other pre-made Logitech, Corsair, or Razer keyboard can provide. Like, it's not even on the same level. It's insane. So I'm gonna go over what I like and what I don't like, starting with the body or the frame or whatever you wanna call it. The keyboard that was sent to me is the partial aluminum, but you have a few options. You can either get mechanical or optical, with this being the optical, and you have 3 kind of different bodies. You have a partial aluminum, which is about $110, and that has a plastic bottom with the top part of the keyboard being made out of aluminum. You have an acrylic, which is $200, which is, it's just acrylic. And then you have a full aluminum keyboard, which is also $200. Then if you decide to get the optical version of the keyboard, then all you have is the partial aluminum option, which is just $90, which is, again, the one that I have. The materials are nice, like it's your standard high quality aluminum and plastic, but the design itself is pretty boring, has not much going for it. It's got pretty wide and strong rubber stoppers, so you won't have to worry about the keyboard moving on its own when you adjust something on your desk. Like, if your desk shakes, this thing's not going anywhere. It's also got 2-way adjustable legs, so you can pull out the small portion of the legs to make the rear of the keyboard sit a little higher, and you can pull out the even bigger part to make the rear of the keyboard sit much higher. Now, this keyboard already has a slanted design to it, so when it's laying flat, the front of the keyboard is lower than the top, so I'm personally never going to use it because if I did use the legs, there would be too much wrist arching and my wrist would just hurt, and it's probably bad long term. So I'm not a fan of these legs just being on here, but hey, if you want to use them, go ahead. It's got the standard keyboard design profile, so the keycaps are pretty large, the switches are pretty large, and the body is pretty large, kind of like most keyboards. So it's not as low as the Logitech G915 TKL, but really nothing is, so I'll give it kind of a pass, especially with the typing experience that this delivers. It's RGB backlit, but it needs to improve. Like, the gradient from one color to the next is very good. It's up there with Corsair, and I think they're one of the best. And the saturation is also good, but the problem is the brightness. It doesn't get bright enough. Even with room lights, we're not even talking about sunlight, just room lights, I still struggle to see the RGB. Now, I can still see the keycaps just fine and see what I'm typing, but I want that flare, So overall, the RGB is good, but it just needs to be brighter, which brings me on to battery life. It's rated for 50 hours of battery life with the RGB on, but I got nowhere near that much. I used it for maybe 2 days for 8 hours each day, and the battery needed to be recharged. That's atrocious for a keyboard with a 4000 milliamp hour battery. With that said though, the battery life on this is still not a problem because you're just never going to use it on Bluetooth mode because the Bluetooth on this keyboard is garbage. I noticed like a half a second to 1 full second of input lag between what I pressed and my character's movement in games. I was wondering why I was sucking so hard in games like Valorant, and I noticed, I'm like, wait a minute, maybe it's the keyboard. Sure enough, I plugged it in and immediately I noticed my character's movements were so much more responsive. So if you're going to game, just don't use Bluetooth mode at all. Like, there are things like the Logitech G915 TKL with its Lightspeed technology, and that's awesome. But this, with its Bluetooth, garbage. Just don't use it. If you're gonna play games, use it on wired mode. If you're typing documents and whatnot, then it really doesn't matter, but if you still want that input lag to be instant, then just plug it in all the time. It connects via USB-C, which is nice, none of this micro USB garbage, but if you still wanted to use Bluetooth, you can hold the function 1, 2, or 3 key to connect up to 3 different Bluetooth devices. If you want to switch between wired and wireless mode, hold the function key and tap the spacebar. There are also a lot of different functions you could do by holding the function key, like increasing or decreasing your keyboard brightness, having a different effect or effect speed, media keys like play, pause, and you can even go to a Mac mode by holding function and 7 to switch the Alt key to a command key. Pretty nice. A lot of this stuff is adjustable through software, but I'm not a fan of the software. First off, when you try to download the software, you can't find something for the AK84S specifically. You have to look for the SK, GK, and NT models, which isn't even the same as the AK that I'm using here. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is that while it is very robust, it's not intuitive at all. I'd consider myself somebody who's pretty adaptable and can figure out most things. But with this software, I still can't figure out how to properly adjust the RGB setting to what I want, my own custom effects, etc. If I want to do something different, I'd have to use the RGB built into the keyboard. Now again, that's not a problem because I have these keycaps, but when I had the black ones that were included with the keyboard, I couldn't figure out how to do anything. Alright, so that's most things, but how does it feel and sound like? Well, I'm going to show you right now, so take a listen. To the keyboard enthusiast or elitist, this might sound like nothing special, but to somebody who's used to the Corsair K95, Logitech G915 TKL, and a bunch of other stuff, going from those to this out of the box, this was already so much better sounding and feeling, especially the feel. The feel is so smooth and linear, and they are linear switches. They actually are these chocolate linear switches, and I changed them to these Gatoron yellows, but in terms of smoothness, these were already so much smoother than anything else I've felt before, to the point where it was just like, how can it get any better than this? Surely it's not that big of a difference, right? Oh man, was I so wrong. So let me show you a few, like clips of me going from what it was stock to what I have now. Basically just some B-roll, and then I'll show you some cinematics and tell you what I did to the keyboard. So there you go. It's not the prettiest keyboard in the world, but I built it and I love it. It's kind of like your child. Now, what I used was Gatoron yellows, like I mentioned before. That cost about $44, including shipping. I used the Everglide Panda Gold stabilizers, which was $25, and I don't remember how much shipping that was. I got those from drop.com. And $30 for the keycaps, which I got off Amazon, which are probably some bootleg versions of something that actually exists. I don't know. All I know is that I like the way these keycap looks. Then lastly, I also got some lube, which is about $15, and total everything, including the keyboard, costs about $225, which does sound like a lot, at least when you compare it to pre-builts that you could buy off the shelf at your local Best Buy, Walmart, Micro Center, or whatever. In the custom keyboard space, this is peanuts compared to what a lot of other people spend. We're talking like $500, $800, $1,000 plus. Even some people go as high as $2,500. So this is nothing compared to that, but the typing experience that this has compared to something like the stuff you buy off the shelf at your local store is on a whole nother level. Like when I first typed on this keyboard, my mouth dropped. I could not believe how good a keyboard can sound. I really couldn't. Like if you're going on YouTube and just listening to these keyboard sound porn tests and things like that, where you hear a loud thonk when you tap the keyboard, it's not even the same thing when you're actually typing on it. So if you're like considering going into the custom keyboard space, I absolutely encourage you to, because what you hear on YouTube versus actually hearing it and feeling it in person, your jaw is gonna drop. It's insane, as long as you're doing it right. But enough jibber jabber, let me show you how these keyboards sound. Pretty big difference, right? I know. So that's pretty much all I got for you. But is this keyboard worth $110? Absolutely. One thing that was really deterring me from starting building my own keyboard was the whole soldering process. Like, I don't understand why these high-end custom keyboards have to be soldered. Like, why couldn't they all be hot swapped? And that's where this comes in. This makes it so much easier to get into the custom keyboard space without you having to get all these special tools, learning a new skill, etc. All you do is pop the switches out and pop new ones in. It was so easy. Sure, I did some extra things like lube the switches, the springs, and so on, but you don't have to do all that stuff. It just makes the keyboard feel smoother and sound better. But yeah, for $110, I can't think of many other options, probably because I'm not too familiar with the space, to really compete with this, especially for being hot swappable and having the option to go optical or mechanical. So yeah, I definitely recommend it. And this is now a kind of gateway to me wanting to build a keyboard that's at least $500 or $600 more for that even much better feel and sound. Like, I'm actually gonna end up doing it. I just don't know when, because I just don't have the money right now. But this is what began a new hobby for me. And it's kind of a blessing and a curse. Blessing because my fingers feel better now, because you're typing in that smooth, silky typing, but a curse because my wallet and my bank account is going to really hate me. But that's it. If you guys liked the video, please like it. If you disliked it, dislike it. Consider supporting me on Patreon because I like money, and subscribing because I like to see my subscriber count go higher. Other than that, have a great day every day. Peace.